Well, thank you and welcome. It's now my great honor to welcome back to the Real Estate Roundtable Senator Chris Coons from Delaware. He's no stranger to roundtable meetings. We've had a great relationship, positive relationship with Senator Coons since he was elected to the Senate in 2010. We all know him to be someone who strives to bring senators together and voices together in a bipartisan way to try and get things done. He's part of the Senate Competitiveness Caucus, I believe founded it, and other activities within the Senate to bring senators together. I also want to say that there have been several bills over the years that the senator has authored that have become law, a couple very important that I just want to highlight. One concerning prevention, treatment, and recovery for those that have struggled with drug addiction or opioid problems. And we all know how important that is to us. Of course, he's been involved in research and development, extension of the tax credit there, and other issues. As I started off by saying, we've had a great relationship talking about things over the years. And I've got to say, during this past year, we certainly have had our robust conversations with Senator Coons about problems with those who've lost their jobs, businesses that were closed. And the senator was always very, very helpful and open with us on that. So we welcome you, Senator. You're here coming to our annual meeting. We're talking about housing, infrastructure, competitiveness, worldwide competitiveness. We're talking about tax policy, and we're talking about energy issues, all things that you are focused on. I know you just returned from Taiwan and South Korea on a trip with other senators regarding vaccination. Do you want to share maybe that's a good way to start? And this is our annual meeting. We're transitioning from our leadership of Deb Cafaro, who you know, been our chair for 3 years, and John Fish from Boston is our new chair. So Senator, take it away and welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to everybody on the Real Estate Roundtable board and who's participating or watching virtually. It's been great working with you, Deb. Thank you for your leadership of the board. And to John, I look forward to working with you more closely in the years ahead. As we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic here in the United States, it is more important than ever that we all pull in the same direction to try and revive our economy and grow robustly and to address the needs of the American people. Jeff, I just returned, and so I'm a little bit jet lagged from a trip to Taiwan and South Korea. I went over and back in just 3 days with Senators Duckworth of Illinois and Sullivan of Alaska, both former military, both combat veterans. We went up to the DMZ and had briefings with the U.S. military and intelligence about the security situation in South Korea and the challenges they face with North Korea and China. And a big part of why we were there was jointly with the Biden administration making announcements about donations of 1.1 million vaccines that we were present in South Korea as they were being delivered. And we made an announcement in Taiwan that 750,000 vaccines were being delivered there. Let me put it in broader context for a minute. Under the past administration, the Congress provided the funding and the private sector did the research in partnership with the NIH and our national labs and delivered in record time the most effective, most safe vaccines in the world. And we've purchased 3 times as many doses as we need to fully vaccinate the American population. So as this year unfolds, now that we've achieved more than 50% vaccination in the United States, we do have some surpluses we can begin to give to other countries around the world that are struggling in the face of this pandemic. In the end, the pandemic won't be resolved until it's resolved globally. So if we've got whole countries or regions that aren't vaccinated, we're still at risk because there's still the risk that there will be more transmissive or more lethal variants mutating out there in the world, as has just happened in India, in Brazil, in the United Kingdom. So this is both self-interested and a humanitarian gesture that helps reinforce countries that are longtime partners and allies, but also countries that helped us. In the early days of the pandemic, when we were struggling to get PPE distributed in the United States, Taiwan sent us 10 million individual masks, and Korea sent us respirators and masks at a time when we were in greatest need. So it was a great trip. I enjoy doing bipartisan delegation trips, and Senators Sullivan and Duckworth and I got to know each other better on the 14-hour flight over and back.
Senator, that's a terrific effort on your part, and we fully support and agree with you. This is a worldwide effort. It requires everybody to be pulling in the right direction so we don't slide back, and we endorse and support you. You're involved in so many good things like that. Another was your visit recently to Tulsa to commemorate the massacre there and those who lost their lives in Tulsa 100 years ago. Would you like to share your thoughts a little bit on that, and then we'll get into some issues? Go ahead.
Sure. You know, one of our challenges in this country is the chapters of our own history that we don't know. It was James Langford of Oklahoma who invited me to join him in the Centennial in Tulsa. And I met a number of people who grew up in North Tulsa in the neighborhood, the Greenwood district that was the target of a white riot that literally assaulted and burned to the ground the Greenwood neighborhood, about 30 square blocks in 1921, who had grown up there but had never been taught the history of what had happened. President Biden was there for the Centennial, the first president to remark on it publicly. And I'll tell you, it reminds me of a chapter in my own hometown. I'm from a tiny little town in Delaware named Hockessin. We're all familiar with Brown versus Board of Education, the landmark 1954 Supreme Court case that ordered the integration of America's public schools. But I didn't know until I was in law school that a tiny little red brick so-called colored school in Hockessin, Delaware, was at issue in one of the 5 cases that were merged together in front of the Supreme Court. It's a proud chapter in Delaware's history because one of the parents of a student who was going to that school in Hockessin appealed to the Delaware courts. And in 1952, a brave young chancellor, Colin Seitz, actually got in his car and went out to the little town of Hockessin, visited the white school, visited the black school, and said, these are obviously not equal, and ordered the integration of Delaware's public schools, expecting to be overturned on appeal to the Supreme Court. So of those 5 cases in Brown versus Board, one of them, the one from Delaware, was actually upheld by the Supreme Court in that decision. I grew up a quarter mile away from this school. My mom was a public school teacher, and yet I'd never heard of this chapter in Delaware history until I was in law school. I think it's important that we look hard at some of the more difficult chapters in our history and then move forward, find ways to address or redress some of these historical challenges. While I was in Tulsa, I had a chance to meet with a really inspiring entrepreneur, a man who's dedicated his life, very successful in the energy industry, and now running the George Kaiser Family Foundation. And we had a long conversation about his plans to invest in the North Tulsa community, in providing community resources in housing and education and in other opportunity in partnership with some grassroots community organizations. And I left more hopeful than when I got there. I met lots of people from both Tulsa and from around the country who gathered to commemorate that centennial. And I just want to thank the folks who are on this call for the contributions that so many of you make to providing employment and opportunity and housing for people all over our country.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. And you know, it's no surprise that you're involved in these kinds of efforts and speak out on them. Amherst undergraduate, Yale Law, Yale Divinity School experience, and it all comes together. And then we all have our personal life experiences, as you just mentioned, that drive us to do these things. And the real estate industry is proud to be supporting these efforts that you mentioned. And you mentioned the word hopeful. So let's go to something hopeful. And let's talk about the infrastructure bill. The president's proposal, other proposals out there. We all know, we've all heard the jokes. It's infrastructure week again. But what do you think? What can we expect about the infrastructure package? How it might come together? I know it's very much a crystal ball, but your crystal ball is clearer than a lot of people. So what do you see in it?
Well, first, you know, President Biden approached the issue of legislating around infrastructure and the unmet needs in the American economy and American families in sort of a classic way, old school way. He didn't have his team write a bill and send the bill up to the Hill. He put out sort of a framework and said, here's roughly where I think we ought to be putting money in everything from airports and harbors to rail to transit to other things that are not traditionally considered infrastructure, like investments in community college, providing support for family leave and for childcare. They came out in two big packages, the American Jobs Plan and the American Family Plan. And we're now on a two-track engagement here in the Senate. There's a bipartisan group that's continuing to negotiate about how do we pay for some of the traditional hard infrastructure, things that are more like roads and bridges and tunnels and harbors. And then a group on the Budget Committee that is preparing for the possibility that we will pass some big part of the president's agenda with only Democratic votes. And it's my hope and expectation that we will move forward on both, that we'll end up getting a bipartisan infrastructure bill that is about $1 trillion, but where hundreds of billions of dollars of that are part of the baseline of what we would have done anyway. I'm encouraged that the EPW committee, which my senior senator, Tom Carper of Delaware, works hard with his ranking member, Senator Capito of West Virginia. They just passed out of EPW unanimously a new surface transportation bill. That's the authorizing language. I know I'm getting technical, forgive me. Now we have to marry, that's the mother may I. Now we have to marry it up with here's how much you get. Because you have to have both an authorizing and an appropriating bill to actually move forward and fund things. Look, to your point, Jeff, it became somewhat of a joke in the last couple of years. We all know how much we need infrastructure, but paying for it is the challenge. What's the revenue source? What has changed things about the current environment is that last year we appropriated $4 trillion in one-time expenditures just to deal with the crisis of the pandemic. And I think that has reduced somewhat the resistance to looking at big and bold federal investments. These are 30 and 40-year investments, not one-time investments. And these are investments in the sorts of things that help revitalize and build communities, tie our country together and make us more competitive. So I'm still cautiously optimistic, although it's been hard sledding in the last 2 weeks. I was just on the floor of the Senate a few minutes ago, talking with both Republican and Democratic folks who are still negotiating together about whether we can get a bipartisan package done.
Well, we hope that that can be accomplished. Frankly, within the administration's proposal, there are many doors that have been opened that allow us to talk about a lot of issues. Housing, we like what they're saying on housing to incentivize local governments to be more flexible in their zoning. For example, a lot of the housing affordability and availability issues are local zoning or NIMBYism cause. And then also in the energy efficiency and climate area, we want to be a big part of reducing energy, reducing CO2 emissions in buildings, and we're working in that. So we're looking forward to continuing to work in this area. I did mention that you were active over the last year, in particular regarding understanding that people who lost jobs or businesses that closed needed a little extra boost. I know you have some legislation to expand opportunities now for low-income families to receive more rental assistance. How do you see that fitting into this year, or where do you see that going?
Well, thank you for raising that, Jeff, and I appreciate the Real Estate Roundtable both for giving me some constructive technical input on the bill and for advocating for it. Senator Kramer, a Republican senator from the Dakotas, is my co-sponsor. It's actually the first bill I'm doing with Senator Kramer, who's on the Banking Committee. And it frankly provides significant incentives to private landlords to get into the Section 8 market, something that in my own 6 years being responsible as a county executive for the second largest housing authority in Delaware, I realized that there was a very small subset of landlords that were willing to put up with the challenges of participating in a federal housing program. This provides incentives for an explicit liaison to the landlords, additional incentives to bring in landlords who maybe haven't tried it or haven't seen the value of it, and then investments to improve the quality of housing. So I was grateful for the endorsement from the realtors and the home builders, and the Real Estate Roundtable, and I'm optimistic we can get that passed. It is something that the Banking Housing Committee Chairman and Ranking have both expressed initial enthusiasm about. So we'll see. There's a lot of things on the plate here in Congress this year, and getting floor time is a challenge. But I'm hopeful that this bipartisan bill can see the light of day in the Banking Housing Committee and then to the floor.
You know, one thing that popped into my mind when you were reviewing this, you know, you did appropriate a great deal of funds last year. And a lot of those funds are still waiting to be distributed by, you know, people in cities and states out there. And that is kind of also a problem with some of these housing assistance programs aside from the pandemic. And it causes owners of buildings maybe not to want to participate because sometimes it takes a while for that assistance to flow through. And I just bring that to your attention, sir. And we're all of a like mind here. I also, it's sometimes surprising when I tell senators how concerned and interested people in the real estate business are about international trade, about supply chain issues, about China in particular. You're very, very active in looking at trade issues and China. Would you, in the remaining minute or so that I've got you strapped to the chair, sir, can you comment on your legislation in that area and other thoughts on China and trade?
Well, it's funny you asked that closing question, because literally right now, right this minute on the floor of the Senate, they've called the final vote for passage of a big, bold bipartisan bill led by Senator Schumer and Senator Young. Right? I mean, that's bipartisan. The international part of it, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee part of it, I contributed significantly to. Senator Menendez of New Jersey and Senator Risch of Idaho led that. It actually came out of Foreign Relations 21-1. A big part of it came out of Commerce, another part came out of Homeland Security. It is a bill that will invest $120 billion in making America more competitive, in reviving domestic manufacturing, and investing in things like semiconductor chip and 5G and quantum computing, both R&D and applied science, and then manufacturing. In fact, in several conversations and meetings I had with private sector leaders in South Korea just in recent days, the senior leaders of Samsung and SK and other companies, they're watching this bill very closely, and it's incentivizing significant new investments in the United States. When President Biden met with President Moon of South Korea just a few weeks ago, they announced more than $50 billion in new investment in the United States by South Korean companies, partly incentivized by this bill. China is our primary global competitor for this century. And I respect the fact that we've pulled together here in the Congress on a bipartisan basis. Look, the riot that happened here on January 6th left a lot of folks around the world and here in the United States worried about the status of our democracy and whether we can work together and hear each other and actually function. And bluntly, the Chinese have been using that incident around the world to say, look, American democracy is in decline. Today's vote, this regular order, traditional, good old-fashioned bipartisan bill writing that's taken weeks and weeks and is now producing a finished product that'll be passed by the Senate in just a few minutes, is a really encouraging sign, both here domestically in terms of our investment in our own future and in terms of the signal it will send to our competitors and our allies around the world.
Fantastic. And I know that you've got to go do your work and vote on this bill. We wish you well. Keep it up. You're a big voice. The senators respect you across the aisle. I know that. Our members certainly do from seeing you. And people tell me you've got the ear of the president. So we respect you very much and want to continue working with you, sir. And go get some rest from your trip around the world, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff. Great to be on with everybody. Take care.